Welcome to the Trust Factor Radio, bringing you interviews and insights to unlock the power of the subconscious mind to create authority, credibility, and trust. With your host, the Authority Architect and best-selling author, Neil Howe.
Hello and welcome to the show. This is your host, Neil Howe, and today my special guest is Keith Moehring. Keith is the VP of Strategic Growth at PR 2020, and he helps B2B organizations use content, PR, and automation to generate awareness, drive website traffic, convert leads, and nurture those leads into sales opportunities. Well, this is going to make for a great conversation. Welcome to the show, Keith Moehring.
Thank you for the opportunity. Looking forward to it.
Well, tell us a little bit about yourself, Keith, and how you got going in digital marketing, and a little bit more about PR 2020 as well.
Sure. So, I was out of college. I was actually started refinancing people's mortgages and realized I didn't want to do that pretty quickly. So I was going back to school to be a math teacher when our CEO, Paul Raitzer, asked if I could fill in for the summer. He had just started the agency, PR 2020. And so I said, sure. And then they let me work on a bunch of sports accounts. And I'm like, this is solid. I'm going to stick here. This is great. So at that time, when we first got rolling, it was largely kind of the traditional PR marketing stuff. So you got your collateral, you got your traditional PR, media relations, pitches, that kind of thing. And then in 2007, 2008, we came across the whole inbound content marketing philosophy and really saw that as kind of the future of marketing. So we started gearing our services around those areas, starting out primarily with content and SEO, growing then to incorporate a lot of the social channels as they became available. And now, we work with clients across all ranges, doing all sorts of different campaigns, from social campaigns, ad campaigns, email nurturing, all that fun stuff. So it's been a wild ride for sure.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you fell into something that you enjoyed instead of trying to force something that you don't like. That's never a good way to be going to work 40 hours a week or more. And I understand that you were one of HubSpot's first partner agencies as well. They're known for the inbound marketing.
Yeah. So we became a client of theirs, or started using their platform in 2007, and then had a number, like at that point, I think our portal numbers like in the hundreds, and now they're in the millions. So it's really kind of interesting. We got in real early with a lot of the founders there, and been a really good relationship, and we helped set the stage and grow the partner network. So it's a lot of fun.
So let's talk about the kind of companies that you help. Is it local business? Is it the big, large companies?
All the above. So we work with, one of our clients is a local storage facility, and we also worked with billion-dollar banks. But I would say kind of our sweet spot and where we've really grown over the last couple of years is in with manufacturing companies. Specifically working with individuals within those companies who are really looking to make a change in terms of, in terms of kind of how their company does marketing and sales, bringing in some of the new wave, as kind of a lot of these manufacturing companies are steeped in the traditional marketing and sales approach. So
when you're talking manufacturing companies specifically, what kind of companies are you looking at?
Generally, anybody that really is looking to evolve their processes. So it's, I wouldn't say there's a specific type, but we tend to work more often with mid to large sized enterprise or manufacturing companies. But we do have a couple clients that are smaller local manufacturing companies too. So.
Okay. And what kind of problems are they having then? I know you said that they're kind of steeped in the past, still using some of the old marketing. They're just not keeping up with what's new with digital.
Yeah, and it seems like more often than not, it's like one or two people in the company and they're really trying to drive that change. We're calling them change agents internally there. So they're often working towards trying to prove out a model. So we'll help with that, help them kind of build up a strategy to find, first off, actually taking a step back, what are we trying to achieve? What's the goal? And then once we get that, an understanding of that, building out a strategy that helps us reach that goal in a realistic time frame, and kind of help set expectations. But in a lot of cases, we're trying to prove out a model so that they can get more buy-in from leadership in terms of budget and manpower.
Mm-hmm. So what does that strategy session look like? How are you uncovering their goals and designing a strategy for them?
Sure. So what we do is we have a proprietary model that we use. It's called a marketing growth hackathon. And the idea is it's a very interactive brainstorming session that brings together all the key stakeholders with it who are influenced by marketing and sales. So it's the marketing team, it's some C-level suite people, it's sales teams, and if possible, in one case, we actually had a customer there as well. So we try to bring everybody into the room, and prior to that workshop, what we've done is worked with our main contact to define, okay, what is the goal? And as part of that, we have to kind of benchmark where they're at and what's a realistic goal, which is always part of the challenge. But once we have that goal in place, and that's a SMART goal, so it's got to be specific, we have to be able to measure it, it's got to be attainable, it's got to be related to the overall business goals, and there needs to be some sort of time element to it. So essentially increasing driving 20% new marketing qualified leads by the end of Q1 2019. That would be a really solid goal. And what we'll do then is kind of audit everything they've got from a marketing perspective, the assets that we can utilize from a marketing campaign. So the content they've got, any upcoming milestones coming up, any contact lists or influence or relationships with media outlets. And we'll compile all that information into one workbook. And then kind of go through as a group, once we get everyone sitting around the table, kind of go through all these things and start trying to infuse and ask questions about what is the best way to reach this target audience that we're trying to hit with our marketing messages. How can we get in front of these people? What are the best ways to do so? And usually about halfway through this brainstorming session, what's nice is people are already starting to throw out ideas and we're taking notes. And when we get to the actual brainstorming part, we've already got 10, 15 ideas. And now we're just kind of like asking more probing questions and getting people to talk. And they're just kind of going back and forth internally. So by the end of it, usually we'll have a couple dozen solid ideas that will help us get to that goal. But what's nice is that once we get those ideas, what we'll then do is go through and rank each of those ideas based on, one, our ability to execute it. Do we have the tech? Do we have the time? Do we have the talent? And do we have the budget to actually effectively execute on this campaign? And if we do, and we hit that campaign out of the park, what is the realistic impact on achieving or helping us hit that goal that we've set? So, and what's nice is as you start ranking those campaign ideas by ability to execute and impact probability, the really solid ideas start to surface. And then by the time we're done with it, we have a list of campaign ideas that we've got like 2 to 3 to 6 months in some cases of marketing plans built out and ready to go.
Now, it seems you would think some of these mid to large sized manufacturing companies would or should have done all this already and have their goals all set out, but they don't have a plan?
Well, actually, going back to the goals, that's not always the case. They may have business goals and they may have sales goals, but to get to those sales goals, they need to generate, X number of sales qualified leads. And when it gets into that level, they're usually lost in the dark. Largely, one, because the tracking and reporting technology to figure out how many they're currently getting, it isn't in place, or it isn't in place to an extent that it needs to be. And two, how to essentially establish that benchmark. So that's really where we come in, is to help them understand kind of where they're at in the process, and then help them set that, okay, if we're going to achieve this, we have to do X, and here's how the marketing campaign or program should look.
So what does that X look like? Is it generating content to attract the right people?
Yeah. In a lot of cases, what we're trying to do is obviously the website is kind of that 24-hour, 7 days a week salesman. And so what you always need to do, especially with manufacturing companies, is anyone who's coming to that site typically knows who they are and are evaluating them as a solution provider. So what we try to do and what we harp with clients is we need to make sure that your website is, one, ready to inform anybody who's coming to the site to evaluate you as a potential solution provider, give them everything they need to make sure that they can answer all their questions online without necessarily having to reach out to you. So that's like product details, if there's any sort of specification information that goes into it, and then making sure that the lead conversion points are on the site. So there's obviously, we need lead forms, but do we have live chat available? Is the phone number easily accessible? So once that site is built up to answer those sales qualified lead questions and get them to take some sort of action, the next step we're usually working with them on is, okay, now we need to talk about your solution as part of a variety of different ways people can solve a pain point. So what exactly does your type of solution provide? What are the benefits and how can they solve that bigger pain point? And then kind of once that next level is established, then we get up to that third level, that higher, that broader bucket of, okay, someone's got a pain point. We need to educate them on how to solve that pain point. So essentially taking that buyer funnel and working bottom up to make sure that we've got a solid foundation. So when we get to the broader marketing campaigns, we know we're taking care of home base when they get there.
And what kind of mediums work best for these kinds of marketing companies to get that message out?
So it depends on the company and kind of the product or service being offered. So in a lot of ways, search engines tend to be the biggest driver of traffic, and making sure that we've got the content that drives people to our site is obviously key. But in a lot of ways, trade publications are actually still a thing for the larger the manufacturing industries. So different types of guest articles there are usually pretty effective. And then contact databases, especially like outdated contact dates. Like you haven't touched base with these 1,000 contacts in 2 years. Let's try to re-engage them, get them back in the fold. So it depends on kind of what the company has in terms of assets. If they've got a huge contact database, great. If we need to build that up, then we're starting to put the campaigns in place to do that. So we're always trying to churn out content that, one, satisfies the search queries that would be available to us for those specific keywords, but then bigger content assets that someone potentially have to download, or the pillar pages, which are like 2,000 word web pages that speak to a specific topic and answer any and all questions related to that. Search engines tend to chew that stuff up. So obviously that social could also play a part. So LinkedIn tends to be a bigger social network for our audiences. So it really depends, and as part of that strategy and figuring out who that buyer is, we have to go through that process of learning, okay, where are they at and how can we get in front of them?
Mm-hmm. So all this is really around data and collecting data about, who your ideal target market is. Explain to me, in a little bit more detail, what specifically you're trying to find with that data and how you're using it.
Yeah, so if we're trying to figure out who we're targeting and how best to get in front of them, the first place we're going is to the sales reps. And we're asking them conversations about what kind of questions you could ask, what are the pain points, what are the reasons someone doesn't go with you, that kind of thing. That's usually a wealth of information that we can then start applying to some of the other research that we're doing. So Once we've got those questions answered and we kind of get a gauge on the different keywords they're asking, we'll go out and do some keyword research on different tools to capture, like, what are the potential from a search perspective. We'll do subsequent online research, like what's going on in terms of the social activity around the topics that we know to be relevant to the personas. We're doing additional like, what are some of the competitors? How are they positioning themselves? What are they writing about? What kind of content are they generating? So all this stuff kind of gets compiled in, and we're trying to develop a really solid brief on who that target audience is. And then once we get some of the campaigns in place to target them, let's make sure the tracking and reporting is in place, that we can effectively gauge how effective the campaigns we're putting in place are, and then learn from that data. So we're always trying to take the data, turn it into intelligence, turn that intelligence into actionable things that we can do from a marketing program, like changing this email to this direct message kind of a thing. And then hopefully those actions then become outcomes. So that measurable outcomes towards that goal that we set out originally.
So, Keith, talk to me about some of the misconceptions or myths you might hear about digital marketing in general, and what works and what doesn't work.
So, I mean, there's a couple interesting ones that we often kind of get into a conversation with clients about. And one of them would be, like, once we just develop the content, that's all we really need to do. In reality, the content, if we're talking like a marketing program and you want to divide up how much time is going into specific areas, 20% should really be dedicated to developing that high quality, very targeted content. And the rest of the 80% should be focused on distributing that content to get it in front of the audiences. So whether that's paid advertising, email, social, all that kind of stuff. We need to get that content out and continually promote it. It's also not a one-time thing. So we develop a blog post, we send an email about it and pitch it to one publication. That's not enough. It needs to continue, that piece of content needs to be continually seeded in a lot of the campaigns moving forward. So like, if, for example, nurturing campaigns are kind of living beasts. They'll continuously evolve, and we'll continually try to work in new pieces of content into them to keep that stuff live and keep it in front of the people that we know would find the most relevance of it.
So what exactly is a nurturing campaign for those that don't know?
Sure. So if for example, someone fills out a form on your site to download your product guide or whatever it is, we would set up a series of nurturing emails that would send automatically over a specific time frame that would speak to and kind of support what you originally converted on with that piece of content and answer some additional questions there. But always those emails start to point towards other resources or next steps. And that series of emails, whether it's like 2 emails, 3, 5 emails, sent over maybe 2 to 4 weeks. Those emails are designed to we know where someone's at based on how they converted in terms of the buying cycle. And those emails' job is to take them to that next level, continue to educate them, motivate them, engage them, drive them to that next step. So hopefully then they either self-qualify themselves by just saying, no, I'm not interested, or they take that next step and say, hey, I'd like to talk to someone. Can I schedule a time to meet?
So it's all about developing that relationship and keeping the prospects engaged until they take an action. Right,
yeah.
What kind of mistakes do you see businesses make when they try and do some of this kind of stuff themselves?
One is the tracking and reporting data, or the tracking systems aren't properly in place. So the data feeds everything. And with the ability of with everything going online, our ability to track and report on any sort of engagement someone has with our website, with our social profiles is huge. So ideally, we've got the tracking and reporting in place that, one, captures all that top of the funnel engagement that they may not necessarily fill out a form, but they're on our site. What pages are they viewing? How long are they on the site? Are they bouncing quickly? How are they interacting with the content? Are they clicking on CTAs? That kind of thing. And then having the system in place, as soon as someone does fill out a form, that we can then start tracking every engagement they have with us all the way through to ultimately, hopefully, a customer conversion. And so by having all that data in place, and we can track from first touch point all the way through to customer sign-on, we can then start working backwards of, okay, here's our ideal customers, and here's everything we know about how they go through the buyer's journey. And then all that data can then start to really inform the strategy that you're putting in place and how you're marketing your product and positioning it within the space.
It seems like a lot of work, Keith. It would make sense for a large company to hire a digital marketing firm to do the work for them. But what, in your experience, holds them back? What fears might they have that stops them from taking that step?
So it's a lot of time it's uncertainty on whether or not it's going to deliver the results. That they need to essentially show their boss that this is why I invested this much time and effort into it. Because in some respects, in some industries in particular, it's a relatively new approach. But what's often the case is once we get, especially when we get that tracking reporting in place, that's data that they've never had access to. So people's eyes start to lighten up when you start showing them these reports, and you can start connecting dots for everybody. And a lot of times too, it's just one of the bigger challenges our clients have is, while the marketing side, we can easily sell that, the idea of their sales team changing how they go about their job, like adopting a new technology and learning a new process and logging data in the proper spots, that's always a huge hurdle that we have to work with our clients on to essentially educate the sales team on why we're trying to do what we're doing and why we need you to do it this way. So, because obviously if you don't have the sales data associated with some of the marketing campaigns, it's hard to tie that ROI to everything.
Well, knowing that you keep great data, give me some examples of how what you do has worked for the clients that you've worked with so far. Give me an example of a company that you've worked with, what kind of problems that they were having before engaging you, what you were able to do for them, and ultimately what was that outcome?
Sure. So I'll give you one example. We worked with a roofing tool and equipment distributor, and they sold roof drains and parts. And he was explaining the problem to us is, like, apparently it's very easy to identify a roof drain based on the color, the size, all that kind of stuff. And so we brought up the idea, why don't we create an interactive tool that someone could go through the process of, okay, my drain is this color, it's this size, it's got this different feature, and the tool surfaces the drain for them. Because then they at the same time, they had an e-commerce store online that they could purchase roof drains through. So we built this tool, and it took off. I mean, it satisfied a real need in the market. And then additional campaigns we ran, we quickly realized with them that there was a huge gap in the search results for specific product details from some of the bigger manufacturers. And in a lot of cases, the manufacturers of the roof drains contained everything online in PDFs. So we took all that information and converted it to indexable web pages. Well, the search traffic just took off because we satisfied a huge need on the search results, and we got a lot of really good traffic and ultimately sales from that content, just kind of satisfying the search results gaps that existed.
It seems like a lot of the companies that you deal with are still based in the old model, and they need that outside eye of specifically a digital marketing company to see those gaps, like you were saying, is that something that you come across many times and just say, hey, have you noticed that there's a gap right here? And if you did this, it could have, X amount of value to your company?
Yeah, and there's a lot of that. I mean, we know where to look for opportunities, having done this for now like 12 years. So it's easy for us to kind of flag where the opportunities are based on what we've done for past clients. So when we were talking about the marketing growth hackathon, those strategy sessions, a lot of the ideas that we're bringing to the table are from past experience that we know have worked for others, and based on the situation the client's in, the scenarios kind of sync up. So we're bringing those back up because we've seen them work in the past. So yeah, there is a lot of that, of kind of just taking a look at the data and that they essentially didn't have before, and then drawing off some past experiences we've had.
So one good strategy session and a couple of ideas can really have some exponential growth for the companies that you work with. Yeah.
I mean, ideally, from the strategy session, we've got some really cool, effective campaign ideas that we can execute on like within the first 30 days. And within 90 days, we're evaluating the performance of those campaigns and are drawing off lessons from that data and then applying them to the campaigns we're slated to run for the next couple months.
So we've covered a good broad topic here of information. Keith, if there's something that we haven't really touched on yet you'd like to mention, what would that be?
I would say the other interesting part of this whole space is the how AI is going to contribute to a lot of what we do. So using the AI platforms to be a lot smarter, because they can manipulate and work with the data at superhuman speeds that obviously a lot of us can't. And with those tools, a lot of the marketing jobs we do, for example, writing email subject lines. There are tools out there right now that exist that will automate that part using real AI to write better subject lines and get you better conversion and open rates. So a lot of these tools, it's a lot of mix matching right now, because a lot of these tools satisfy a very specific niche need, but they can be put in place, and with the right data behind them, they can be really, really effective.
So, just thinking about the marketing industry and how far it's come in the last 5-10 years, you look another 5-10 years into the future, and it's very apparent that, no matter what industry that you're in, if you're not keeping up, you're going to get left behind, right?
Yes. Yeah, I would say that's for sure. I mean, there's a lot of venture capital going into these different AI technologies, and a lot of them are focused on the marketing space. So it's a cool time if you like kind of groundbreaking technology and how that's going to impact your job.
So share with me a lesson that you learned early on. And I know you've been in business for a while and dealing with all these different companies for many years now, but you share with me a lesson you learned early on dealing with them and how that still impacts how you do business today.
That's a good question. I would say one of the best lessons that I learned is trust your intuition, but if you at all possible can, back it up with some sort of data. So as you learn and as you grow within this field and you start to get really into and start learning and doing a whole bunch of these different type of campaigns, trust your gut, because often it's going to be right and pointing you in the right direction at least. But the minute you can start backing up your intuition with some hard data that's clean, that's reflective of what's actually going on like a website, for example, it just becomes you become that much stronger as a marketer.
That's right. People make decisions based on emotion, and they back it up with the rational brain and those facts and data. So you got it spot on there. Now, Keith, if somebody listening to this wants to reach out to you to get more information, what is the best way for them to do that?
So our website is www.pr2020.com. And my email address is just keith@pr2020.com.
Well, this has been excellent information, Keith. I think, just like I said, looking from another perspective rather than your own perspective all the time. Sometimes when you're in your business, you can't really see what's actually going on. And, that strategy session that you outlined really seems to get a lot of ideas that make a big difference to companies. So thanks for sharing that. And thank you very much for being my guest on the Trust Factor Radio today.
No, very much appreciate the opportunity. It was great talking to you.
And to our listening audience, if you like what you hear, hit that like button and share, and we'll see you next time on the show.
You've been listening to the Trust Factor Radio with Neil Howe. To learn about the resources mentioned in the show and to listen to past episodes, go to thetrustfactorradio.com. To get a copy of the book, The Trust Factor, go to thetrustfactorbook.com. If you are ready to act now and build your authority, credibility, and trust, schedule a consultation with Neil at theauthorityarchitect.com.